Well, this moment means a lot to me, and I will never, never, never in my life forget this moment, ever. I'm happy, really. I got my country. We are not soldiers, we are not politicians, we are not fighters. We're just good people, and we need our country back, and we got it.
Makes you feel pretty good. They're pretty grateful people. Flowers and candy and hugs and handshakes and genuine appreciation. It feels good.
Does it make you feel the risk was worth it?
Of course.
Yeah.
Even without that, the risk would be worth it.
Let's know who the hairy gringo is.
وعاش واهلها واللي يحب الكويت 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 نبتيج يا الكويت بالروح بالدم نبتيج يا الكويت الله اكبر الله اكبر
shouting and yelling and happy. We never did it before. I mean, it's something great from Bush and all the people who helped us.
نبتيج يا الكويت بالروح بالدم.
He came to destroy our country, and that's all. And let him listen. I want him to listen. We hate him a lot. We don't believe in something called Saddam.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met.
An emotional, occasionally smiling President Bush pronounced mission accomplished and said the time had come to stop the fighting.
I am pleased to announce that at midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time, exactly 100 hours since ground operations commenced and 6 weeks since the start of Operation Desert Storm, all United States and coalition forces will suspend offensive combat operations.
After a day that saw jubilant flag-waving Kuwaitis take to the streets in relief and gratitude, President Bush heralded victory in the name of the United Nations and in the cause of the rule of law.
Tonight, the Kuwaiti flag once again flies above the capital of a free and sovereign nation, and the American flag flies above our embassy.
Whether the suspension of hostilities, as the president calls it, becomes a permanent ceasefire is now up to the Iraqis.
Iraq must release immediately all coalition prisoners of war, third country nationals, and the remains of all who have fallen. Iraq must release all Kuwaiti detainees. Iraq also must inform Kuwaiti authorities of the location and nature of all land and sea mines. Iraq must comply fully with all relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions.
The president said this is not a time for euphoria or a time to gloat, but it is, he said, a time for pride. And the commander-in-chief had a special message for the families of U.S. servicemen and servicewomen, many of whom have been serving in the Persian Gulf since August. Soon we will open wide our arms, the president said, to welcome back home to America our magnificent fighting forces. Frank Sesno, CNN.
Is invaded, and Iraq's UN ambassador tells CNN he's received a reply from Baghdad about that. He plans to break the news to the Security Council, and that means the council probably will meet sometime tonight. But in a broadcast about an hour ago, Iraqi radio announced Baghdad will not bow its head. When U.S. Marines entered Kuwait City in the early hours of Wednesday, they found the Stars and Stripes still flying. Soon the American ambassador to Kuwait will be there. The State Department says the embassy will be reopened, perhaps as early as tomorrow. Ambassador Skip Ghanim will go to Kuwait, replacing Nathaniel Howell, who held out for several weeks after Iraq took over the city. Pentagon sources say, except for small pockets of resistance, Iraqi troops are out of Kuwait. All guns should be falling silent in about an hour and a half after the president's announcement. Earlier today, senior Defense Department officials said ground fighting in Iraq was winding down. The one major battle today was in the Euphrates River Valley, where U.S. and French forces took on divisions of the Republican Guard. That fighting appears to be over, with the Iraqis losing about 200 tanks. Overnight fighting with the southernmost Guard unit ended with Allied forces capturing 10,000 more POWs. The Pentagon says more than 1,200 pieces of Iraqi armored equipment were destroyed in that battle. In Kuwait's capital, residents are celebrating the liberation of their city. Their country's flag can be seen everywhere. And despite warnings of possible landmines, Kuwaiti residents poured out into the streets today, firing guns into the air, cheering Allied troops as they drove through the burned-out capital. Some told tales of horror.
No, but I want only Saddam's head. All the Kuwaitis, they want Saddam's head, right?
There is a baking place in Kayfan, you know, they broke it and they took all the boys from inside and they took them hostages. Why, I don't know. I don't know why they're doing such things.
They burned the video and they burned the
flag.
TVs and the video and the fridge.
No electricity.
And no electricity and
no food.
No
What did they do
food.
to your mother?
They break my hand.
They break his hand.
There was old people, blind, sick, diabetics, kids, a baby which was 1 month old, 1 year, 2 years, just taken from the streets, straight away, just like that. They said, okay, let us get some milk, Pampers. It was all refused.
The worst fear of it was the family that sheltered me and took care of me because, as you know, there was an edict that came out of Baghdad that anyone who sheltered foreigners was subject to execution.
I can't explain, you know, they're like animals, you know, and they killed a lot of people, a lot of my friends, a lot of, you know, I heard a lot of stories. They took my brother for about over 2 months, you know, and he suffered a lot, and he told me, you know, what's been happening to him, you know.
What did happen to him?
Well, they tortured him, you know, and they see people die in front of him, you know, but he was very lucky, you know, to escape.
Kuwait's international airport just outside of Kuwait City was the site of Iraq's last major battle in the emirate. Baghdad's 3rd Armored Division was defeated at a cost of more than 100 Iraqi tanks. Mark Delmage has more.
Task Force Ripper of the Marine 1st Division signed off its mission early Wednesday with units at Kuwait International Airport. The Marines overcame Iraqi Army resistance at the airport and say they have no plans to enter Kuwait City at present. From the time Ripper jumped off Sunday morning from the Saudi desert until Wednesday morning, the task force experienced only 12 casualties. The Marines just behind the airport experienced a gas alert Wednesday morning, the 5th of the brief campaign, but it too was a false alarm. Task force commanders say, as far as they can determine, Iraqi forces did not use gas or biological weapons against them at any time. A handful of jubilant Kuwaitis gave a group of Marines a hearty welcome to Kuwait Wednesday morning. At Kuwait's International Airport, Marine Corps Lieutenant General Walt Boomer said he was not surprised at the lopsided victory, only the ease with which it was accomplished.
I expected them to fight harder than they did, and we were prepared for that. And as we were talking earlier, if they had stayed in every single bunker and fought out of every bunker, the result would have been the same. They still would have lost. Our casualties would have been higher, so thank God that didn't happen.
Major General Mike Myatt, 1st Marine Division commander, was given the Iraqi flag that had flown over Kuwait Airport. General Myatt lauded his Marines in the highest terms.
I'm proud of them. They did exactly as they're trained to do. They executed. They knew what I wanted them to do, my intent. If I couldn't communicate it with them, they did it anyway.
His comment on why the Iraqi army did not fight.
We did a couple things, I think, that disrupted it. We learned where they were assembling and fired artillery right at their assembly points. which flushed them out of the oil fields. And one thing we were surprised that they were operating in those oil fields with the hot fires. And that's really where they came at us.
For now, the Marines will dig in, search out pockets of resistance in their region, and wait for orders to return to the United States. Looking back on the past 3 days, one senior Marine officer told us the odds of 2 Marine divisions against 11 Iraqi divisions was just about right. Mark Dolmeade, CNN, with the 1st Marine Division, Task Force Ripper.
Out in the sea because we wanted the Iraqis to continue to believe that we were going to conduct a massive amphibious operation in this area. And I think many of you recall the number of amphibious rehearsals we had, to include Imminent Thunder, that was written about quite extensively for many reasons. But we continued to have those operations because we wanted him to concentrate his forces, which he did,
to try and avoid the sort of incident which I have just described, both by putting recognition features on our vehicles, and the vehicles were fitted with recognition features, and by our procedures for deconflicting friendly fire from friendly forces.
Rendered to an American Army division. Others gave themselves up to Western journalists. Some POWs are helping coalition forces find minefields. Iraq is believed to hold at least 13 Allied military strategic targets in the Iraqi capital during much of the 42-day war. This power plant was hit recently, shutting down its operation.
We also found that these forces right here were getting a large number of surrenders and were meeting with a great deal of success. We were worried about the weather. The weather turned out was going to get pretty bad the next day, and we were worried about launching this air assault. And we also started to have a huge number of atrocities of really the most unspeakable type committed in downtown Kuwait City, to include reports that the desalinization plant had been destroyed. And when we heard that, we were quite concerned about what might be going on. Based upon that and the situation as it was developing, we made a decision that rather than wait the following morning to launch the remainder of these forces, that we would go ahead and launch those forces that afternoon. Next. So this was the situation you saw the afternoon of the 21st. The Marines continued to make great progress going through the breach in this area, and were moving rapidly north. The Saudi task force on the East Coast was also moving rapidly to the north and making very, very good progress. We launched another Egyptian Arab force in this location and another Saudi force in this location, again to penetrate the barrier, but once again to make the enemy continue to think that we're doing exactly what he wanted us to do, and that's make a headlong assault into a very, very tough barrier system, a very, very tough mission for these folks here. But at the same time, what we did is continued to attack with the French. We launched an attack on the part of the entire 7th Corps, where the 1st Infantry Division went through, breached an obstacle and minefield barrier here, established quite a large breach through which we passed the 1st British Armored Division. At the same time, we launched the 1st Armored Division, the 3rd Armored Division, and because of our deception plan and the way it worked, we didn't even have to worry about a barrier. We just went right around the enemy and were behind him in no time at all. And the 2nd Armored Cavalry Division. And I ought to talk, and the 24th Mech Division also launched out here in the far west, and I ought to talk about the 101st because this is an important point. Once the 101st had their forward operating base established here, they then went ahead and launched into the Tigris and Euphrates Valley. There's a lot of people who are still saying that the object of the United States of America was to capture Iraq and cause a downfall of the entire country of Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, when we were here, we were 150 miles away from Baghdad, and there was nobody between us and Baghdad. If it had been our intention to take Iraq, if it had been our intention to destroy the country, if it had been our intention to overrun the country, we could have done it unopposed for all intents and purposes from this position at that time. But that was not our intention. We had never said it was our intention. Our intention was purely to eject the Iraqis out of Kuwait and destroy the military power that had come in here. So this was the situation at the end of February the 24th in the afternoon. Next, please. The next 2 days went exactly like we thought they would go. The Saudis continued to make great progress up on the eastern flank, keeping the pressure off the Marines on the flank here. The Special Forces went out and started operating small boat operations out in this area to help clear mines, but also to threaten the flanks here and to continue to make them think that we were, in fact, going to conduct amphibious operations. The Saudi forces that came in and took and Arab forces that came in and took these two initial objectives